Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into the stream tonight. This is Net7 again. I'm very happy to have you here on this part two of our Saudi series, which is to support the Saudi intervention, part two. The Houthis are a terrorist group and a proxy of Iran. In my last video, I described to you why to support the Saudi intervention in the first part, because a part of the humanitarian interventionist or neoconservative guidelines is that, well, if there's an intervention, well, we should make it legal and should have the support of regional actors. And then my first video, I showed why not only was the Saudi intervention legal by international law and by Yemeni law, but also supported by many members of the region, particularly members of the Arab League. And in this video, we will be going over essentially the Houthis and why it's important to fight them. Because a part of also the neoconservative interventionist platform as well is you have to also ask yourself this question. Is the cause worth fighting, and are there bad actors at play that need to be combated? And the answer to that question is obviously yes. The Houthis are a terrorist group. There is no disputing that. They murder and kill and maim the innocent. They also are supported and aided and abetted by the Ayatollahs, by the Iranian government in occupied Persia. And so the intervention by the Saudis and by the Arab coalition is wholly legitimate and is right. And so you may be asking, well, why are you doing this video right now? It's been some time since I did my last one. Well, you're right. I have had to catch up, so I do apologize. But I think it was a perfect time, though, because guess what? We just learned today the Houthis attacked the United Emirates. And we're going to watch this video together to start this important series that I'm doing.
Suspected drone attack near Abu Dhabi airport.
And I just also want to highlight, too, that if you're a Yemeni citizen or a Saudi citizen and you are in support of the intervention, I would love to have you come on, whether you're a journalist, government official, private citizen, etc., etc. I am looking, by the way, to get some members of the Yemeni government or Yemeni journalists to come in on at least one of the videos in this 7 video part series. You can reach out to me via Twitter or if you'd like to do that.
Killed at least 3 people, sparking multiple explosions in the United Arab Emirates' capital. India's ambassador to the UAE, Sanjay Sudhir, says that to WION that 2 Indian nationals have been killed in the attack at the construction site, which had oil tankers, and the embassy is in the process of trying to ascertain the identity of those killed. The attack was claimed by Yemen's Houthi rebels. The Houthis are battling a Saudi-led coalition that includes the UAE in Yemen. Now, they have frequently launched cross-border missile and drone attacks on Saudi Arabia, that have claimed a few such attacks on the UAE. The 3 people who were killed and 6 others were wounded when 3 fuel tank trucks exploded in an industrial area. The Houthi.
And this occurred, today or yesterday. I'm not sure about the time difference, between the United States and the United Emirates. But the United Emirates was originally part of the Saudi coalition fighting the Houthis. They then separated and because they're supporting the Southern Transitional Council, which is not supported by the Saudis. But they are at least a part of the effort of fighting the Houthi terrorists who are a proxy of Iran.
A military spokesman said that the group launched a military operation deep in the UAE and would announce important military operations in the coming hours. The UAE had largely scaled down its military presence in Yemen in 2019. This was amid a military stalemate and heightened regional tensions with Iran. That continues to control through the Yemeni forces that it armed and trained.
And it's not just, just an allegation. The Houthis have actually taken credit for this dastardly and horrific attack in which 3 people are killed, 2 of them Indian nationals, and 6 wounded, in the resulting fuel tanker blast that occurred when the Houthis essentially flew a drone with an explosive laid onto it in order to continue their terrorist activities for shock and awe value.
Joining us for more on this story, our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Civil, is with us. Siddhant, it has now been confirmed to WION that 2 Indian nationals have been killed in the drone attack near Abu Dhabi airport. What can you tell us about this?
And my certain hope is that the Indian government will take steps to assist the Saudi coalition now against the Houthi terrorists who have actually killed 2 of their citizens. It's absolutely horrific that this has occurred, and it's up to the international community to step it up and fight the sort of terrorism going on. And it's just unfortunate that people have died because these Houthi terrorists are essentially killing people with weapons and supplies they acquired from the Iranian government. So let's go more off this dastardly attack that occurred. It's just absolutely horrific. So let's examine an article just on this point. And this is going to be from the Medialine, trusted Mideast news. And I will put these, I put these in the video descriptions. So, but I'll also put these in the chat for you. So that way you can look up these articles yourself and these sources. And so that way you can verify the information. So, this is an article from the Medialine. Yemen's Houthi rebels trumpet drone strike on Abu Dhabi oil facility. This is written by Hudayfa Ibrahim. Long-range attack comes after Iran-backed group loses ground in long-running civil war. So the Houthis are getting desperate. They have been losing ground, which is a good thing. And so attacks like this are part of the terrorists' modus operandi, to try and do terrible things of shock and awe value, to try and say that we're still here and we're still active. 3 people died and 6 others were wounded when three fuel tank trucks exploded in an industrial area near Abu Dhabi International Airport on Monday. Yemen's Houthi rebel group said it was responsible for the attack and it would reveal more details later. The Saudi-led Arab coalition to support legitimacy in Yemen military alliance, of which the United Arab Emirates is a member, confirmed that coalition forces detected large-scale hostile activity using booby-trapped drones and that they were launched from the Sana'a airport in the Houthi-controlled capital of Yemen, more than 900 miles away. And it's just incredible that they can take a drone, literally fly at 900 miles, and then operate it to blow up at their specified target. This is the nature of drone warfare, in counter-terrorist operations to counter terrorists using drones. Abu Dhabi police said in a statement carried by the official Emirates news agency WAM that the dead were 4 nationals, 2 Indians and a Pakistani, while the condition of the 6 persons injured ranged from good to medium. The police said it had opened an extensive investigation into the cause of the fire and the circumstances surrounding it. So 2 Indian nationals, 1 Pakistani. Well, Pakistanis support international terrorism. Once again, they become victims of the terrorism that they support. On Monday evening, the Arab coalition retaliated, announcing airstrikes on the Houthi-controlled capital of Sana'a, and said it was targeting terrorist leaders north of the Yemeni capital, according to the reports. I'm going to go a little closer. The coalition also announced. Oh no! Wait. The coalition also announced the F-15 attack planes destroyed 2 ballistic missile launchers that were used on Monday. It stated that the perpetrators of the hostile attack on civilians in Saudi Arabia and the UAE will be accountable. So obviously, the Arab coalition is retaliating to these attacks, as they should. The attack on the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company (ADNOC) storage facility in Abu Dhabi's Musafa area is believed to be the second targeting the UAE or its interests by the Ansar Allah al-Houthi group in less than a month, and the fifth attack against the UAE since the Arab coalition intervened in Yemen's war in 2015. The Houthi attack today is the beginning of the end because the escalation is not in the interest of the Houthis at the international level or even the local level. Well, again, you can thank Biden for delisting the Houthis as a terrorist group. Certainly, when the United States delists a terrorist group that is an actual terrorist group, and delist them, they certainly get emboldened to do terrible things like this. The Houthis have been holding an Emirati-flagged cargo ship, the Rawabi, in the port of Hodeidah since January 3rd, after seizing it in the Red Sea. The rebels say it was transporting weapons to support anti-Houthi groups such as the Southern Yemeni Transitional Council and the internationally recognized government forces, while the UAE says it was carrying medical supplies. Well, it's not. I'm surprised that the Houthis have actually seized a cargo ship like this, but again, they smuggle because they get weapons themselves from the sea through Somalia from Iran. But it's obvious to me that the Houthis are now trying to essentially get leverage by taking hostages and certainly seizing control of assets that they can. I'm more inclined to believe the UAE regarding medical supplies than I am the Houthis. In May 2019, the Houthis' Al Masirah television channel published a video. It showed a booby-trapped drone that exploded in a supply transport vehicle inside a facility at the Abu Dhabi International Airport in July 2018. So this isn't the first time the Houthis have attacked the UAE, and it's not the first time they're trying to brag about it. Terrible. Houthi targets on a daily basis the southern and central regions of Saudi Arabia near the Yemeni border with drones bearing explosives. No one ever talks about that though, because they're all just anti-Saudi. And every day, the Saudi-led Arab coalition announces the number of drone attacks and how many intercepted. And no one ever talks about the successes. They just want to bash on Saudi Arabia. The Abu Dhabi drone attack comes a week after the coalition said it had driven the Houthis out of the oil-rich Shabwa governorate and much of the Marib governorate after more than 7 years. This attack also comes after a major escalation by the Arab coalition, which killed at least 5,000 Houthis during the past month and destroyed dozens of military vehicles and warehouses, according to the daily statistics released by the coalition. Well, thankfully, the Arab coalition is doing something, that even President Biden won't do, which is escalate and fight, the terrorists and beat them. While you have President Biden literally walk right out of Afghanistan and surrender it to the Taliban on a silver platter, the Arab coalition and our allies are actually fighting the Houthi terrorists in Yemen and smashing them, as you can see. What a difference. The Gulf states and several additional Arab countries issued statements to abide by the United States Security Council resolutions and stop targeting civilians. Of course, trying to tell the Houthis that is just absolutely ridiculous. They're not going to listen. Ahmed al-Anezi, a Saudi military expert, told the Medialine, the launch of drones reaching Abu Dhabi from Yemen must be investigated in depth. Absolutely. The fact that they can fire so far is absolutely incredible. So this is the article right here. I offer you all again to please take a look at it. It's just incredible, as you can see, that after an attack like this, the response of the Arab coalition is to attack the Houthis and punish them for engaging in terrorist activities, which is a good thing. Compared to the response that we've seen from this current administration in the U.S., which is simply just to ignore it and deflect and just hope for the best. So pathetic. And the Arab coalition is actually driving the Houthis to such desperate acts because, as the article already said, they've already killed 5,000 Houthi terrorists recently, and they have destroyed numerous warehouses of theirs, numerous assets. It's a complete, difference compared to our current administration. And so you say, well, now we need to get into the matter of whether the terrorist group, the Houthis themselves. So you might be asking, well, yes, they're a terrorist group. Obviously, people who target innocent civilians for political purposes to make a political statement and are targeting them intentionally. You know, reminding you of Ulster and Northern Ireland with the IRA, killing thousands of innocent people, thousands of civilians, and at least over 1,000 civilians, and their disgusting campaign of murder and chaos and essentially national socialism. You might be saying, well, yeah, the Houthis are like the IRA, but how do you know they're actually being armed by Iran? What's the evidence for that, Net 7? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's examine some of that evidence, and so we can start seeing the truth of who is actually supporting and funding the terrorism in the Middle East, and that is the Iranian government in occupied Persia. And one day Persia will be liberated from their terror. So here we go. So as you can see right here, these are missiles that the Yemenis have used to attack Saudi Arabia and in their war of terror, as an extension of Iran's terrorism in trying to bring down Saudi Arabia and bring down the United States and bring down our allies in the region, particularly the Arab coalition. As you can see right here, these are the missiles they're talking about. There is, as you can see, Persian writing. And this right here is Turki al-Malki. He's a member of the Royal Saudi Armed Forces. And I actually have I have a cool picture of him. I'm going to add some touches to it to make a good meme. But let's hear what he had to say.
تصعيد خطير من النظام الإيراني في تزويد الميليشيا الحوثية المسلحة وكذلك أي منظمات إرهابية بما فيها منظمات تهريب الأسلحة بصواريخ باليستية وأنواع كثيرة من الأسلحة النوعية. القصد من هذا تحقيق أجندة معينة، نشر الفوضى، إعطاء نصر وهمي.
So the Houthis do have control of a certain amount of territory in Yemen, and as you can see, they're using places like the Sana'a airport as the other article described, to use to fly from drones from, and also to launch weapons such as this into Saudi Arabia to cause chaos and to kill innocent people. Now, this video is a bit older, so it's certainly been more than 3 years, but the Arab coalition has considerable evidence. And so the Arab coalition has considerable evidence that the Houthis are being armed and supplied by Iran. And so they are a proxy and an extension of Iranian terrorism in the region. They are an extension of that terror, and they are causing chaos in the region resulting in deaths of innocent people. And they are intentionally targeting innocent people because their goal is to commit as much terror as possible, and in the name of a twisted version of their religion. And the Saudis and the Arab coalition are fighting a righteous fight against these terrorists who defame the name of their religion and are nothing more than essentially an extension of the Iranian government, who seeks to control and dominate the region. So let's look at this next article right here. Because you say, well, that's just hearsay. What? That's just one side blaming the other. Do you have any other evidence to highlight this? Well, we do. Revealed how Iran smuggles weapons to the Houthis. And I will post this article in the chat so you may review it yourself. These are weapons right here, Iranian weapons heading to the Houthis in Yemen were seized in two operations by the Arab coalition. As you can see right here, these are essentially large machine gun type weapons, certainly meant to commit acts of terror to essentially create as high a body count as possible. And so a captured gang of armed smugglers has revealed how Iran supplies weapons to the Houthi militias in Yemen through a base in Somalia. So they don't just sneak them over from Iran; they have to get them out of there. So they send them to Somalia, and then they're sent by boat into Yemen. The Houthis exploit poverty in Yemen to recruit fishermen as weapons smugglers and send fighters to Iran for military training under cover of humanitarian flights from Yemen to Oman, the gang said. Oman is an Arab country located right next to Yemen and borders also Saudi Arabia. The four smugglers have been interrogated since May, when they were arrested with a cache of weapons in Bab al-Mandab, the strategic strait joining the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. In video footage broadcast on Yemeni TV, gang leader Alwan Fotani, a fisherman from Hodeidah, admits he was recruited by the Houthis in 2015. So this is not something that the Houthis have just been doing recently or at the time of the publication of this article, which was in October 1st, 2020. This is something that they've been doing for years. His recruiter, a smuggler called Ahmad Halas, told him he and other fishermen would be based in the Somali coastal city of Berbera, from where they would transport weapons and fuel to the Houthis. So not just simply guns to kill as many people, but also oil, because they need that to drive their cars, from which they use to commit acts of terror. And also, here in late 2015, Fotani traveled to Sana'a and met a Houthi smuggler called Ibrahim Hassam Halwan, known as Abu Khalil, who would be his contact in Iran. Pretending to be relatives of wounded fighters, Fotani, Abu Khalil, and another smuggler named Najib Suleiman boarded a humanitarian flight to Oman and then flew to Iran. They were taken to the port city of Bandar Abbas, where they received training on using GPS, camouflage, steering vessels, and maintaining engines. We stayed in Bandar Abbas for a month as they were preparing an arms shipment that we would be transporting to Yemen. So as you can see right here, the fact of the matter is that they'll go to Oman, a country that's neutral, and then they'll fly to Iran from there. So it's not that's not unheard of, flying to a country that's either neutral or like midway, and then flying to getting to your next destination to get training right here. And this is certainly a complex network that requires constant monitoring, especially with the focus on maritime shipping in the region, because that's how the Houthis are getting their guns. On Fotani's first smuggling mission, his job was to act as a decoy for another boat carrying Iranian weapons to the Houthis. The plan was for us to call the other boat to change course if anyone intercepted our boat. So of course they do have plans where if they think they're going to get spotted, they might either change directions, try to drop them off somewhere else, have a second drop off point, or just turn back and try another day, or maybe even just dump the arms to conceal the evidence. He was then sent to Mahra in Yemen to await new arms shipments. The Houthis sent him data for a location at sea where he and other smugglers met Abu Khalil with a boat laden with weapons from Iran, which were delivered to the Houthis. Security analyst Dr. Theodore Kazarik said long-standing trade ties between Yemen and Somalia made arms smuggling difficult to stop. So Somalia itself is also gripped, as you know, in lots of terrorist activities. It has also even an Al-Qaeda presence in the country. Somalia is essentially, in some places, no man's land. It's desperately trying to get its act together and stop, terrorism in the region from Al-Qaeda and other extreme Islamist groups. And so there's not much really Somalia's government can do in regards to this. I mean, obviously we need to support them and help them, and we need to assist the Somali government in getting a stable state going. So that way is to help alleviate with human crisis, but also to fight terrorism in the region and to combat it and destroy it. And certainly the chaos in Somalia is the opportunity of the Iranian government, who are smuggling guns and fuel and to the Houthis from Somalia. This is a complex network that requires constant monitoring, hence the focus on maritime security. Kazrik, a senior advisor to the Gulf State Analytics in Washington, D.C., told Arab News. The smuggling routes are along traditional lines of communication that intermix with other maritime commerce. The temptation to look the other way is sometimes strong, so sharp attention is required to break these chains. Absolutely correct. Because these, obviously, as we had earlier in the article discussed, some of these fishermen, they're very poor. They don't have a lot of money. They do not have much support. These fishermen on the coast essentially need support. And so when these Iranian agents approach them and say, hey, well, if you smuggle some weapons into the country, we'll pay you a lot of money. And, as the end of that article showed, unfortunately, some of these, the temptation of money is very strong to someone who is poor. It's absolutely important for us to stop the maritime smuggling of those weapons, which are killing innocent people that are being smuggled to the Houthis. And this is also, this ties into also one of the criticisms that's used to unfairly attack the Saudi intervention by saying that, well, the Saudis are blockading the ports and stopping food, which is not true. And we'll go over that in another video because I'm going to address that. This is, again, a multi-part series. We'll address those allegations later. But the fact of the matter is that the Saudis are at the ports trying to stop the Houthis from getting weapons which kill more people and from getting the gas which they use to supply their trucks and their vehicles and other weapons which would cause the deaths of more people. And so it's very important that we address that. And I will talk over that in another video. But this video, we will specifically talk about the Houthis and why it is a righteous cause to fight them, because they are a terrorist group supported by Iran. Let's go now into discussing the facts of the matter of how the Iranian government is supporting the Houthis in Iran. So you say, okay, well, you might say, oh, well, there are weapons in the country, and the people who smuggled them claim that they were, hired by agents of the Iranian government or, affiliates with them. But, is this really sanctioned by the Iranian government, in occupied Persia? Are they really doing this, or is this beyond, they do not know about it? Well, I have another article for you to discuss that. The U.S. imposes sanctions on Iran's ambassador to Yemen. This is from Telesur News, English. The U.S. government has imposed new sanctions on Iran, this time on Iran's ambassador to Yemen and on the Iranian International University. I also would like to highlight that this article was written and it was published on December 8th, 2020. This individual right here that you see is the is Iran's newly appointed envoy to the Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen as of October 29th, 2020. And attending a celebration in Sana'a, Yemen, which was the capital before the Houthis seized control of it. The U.S. Treasury Department has confirmed a report by the British news agency Reuters, which, citing a U.S. official, reported that Washington has targeted Iran's ambassador to Yemen, Hassan Ulu, and the Al-Mustafa International University, based in the Iranian city of Qom, which teaches foreign seminarists for the imposition of new sanctions. So individuals within the Iranian government, the ambassador to Yemen from Iran, and the Al-Mustafa International University, so also educational bodies within Iran, are being sanctioned. The official accused Urlu of being an official of the Quds Force of the Iranian Corps of Guardians of the Islamic Revolution, the CGRI, and the aforementioned university of acting as a platform for the Quds Force operations abroad. So as we discussed earlier in the last article, people from Yemen on so-called humanitarian mission or go to Oman, they get a flight there, and then from there they go to Iran. And we discussed how they go to are sent to certain places for training in weapons, training in bomb making and such. And of course, places like this university right here is essentially a front for the Quds Force, which supports and trains Houthi operatives, essentially acting as a platform for their operations. The source explained that both would be sanctioned under U.S. Executive Order 13224. According to a report, then, I want to say, because this is from 2020, then President Donald Trump plans to establish new rounds of sanctions against Iran before being forced to leave the White House in January 2021. So before President Trump was leaving, he was considering new sanctions against Iran. According to a recent Reuters report, former U.S. President Donald Trump is desperately trying to use his final moments in the White House to tighten sanctions against Iran. Well, thank God he was trying to do that. I have my criticisms of Donald Trump, but at the very least, Donald Trump did at least see that the threat to the region's security that Iran posed, and the Iranian government, which is illegitimate and is essentially in charge of occupied Persia, is wholly illegitimate and evil. And one day, we essentially need to make Iran Persia again. The United States has no right to sanction the Islamic Republic of Iran's ambassador to Yemen. This is an overt interference in the internal affairs of Yemen and a flagrant violation of Yemen's sovereignty. This is from Nasha Shakir. All right. There are individuals within the Houthis who are trying to essentially prop themselves up as a quote-unquote government in Yemen, of which they are not, though, and state that, this is illegitimate. But the real government in Yemen has totally supported the Saudi intervention, has totally supported, when America was acting in the right, American assistance. That was in my first video. I discussed all that. If you want, you can go and look up the video. I'll include it in the video description if you would like to look it up, certainly. 2 years ago, the U.S. president abandoned the nuclear agreement signed with Iran in 2015. That was a good decision. And since then has reestablished several rounds of harsh economic sanctions against the Persian country to force it to sign a more intrusive pact. Well, again, I would not refer to Iran as Persia. The government inside Tehran is illegitimate and is not Persian. The Persian people, remember, are by nature, again, they're not practicing their ancestral faith, which is Zoroastrianism. They had a form of Islam, a violent form of and an incorrect form of Islam forced on them by Islamist extremists. And one of my other things is make Persia Zoroastrian again. So hopefully Zoroastrianism will make a comeback in occupied Persia one day. However, the U.S. embargoes and the so-called policy of maximum pressure of the Trump administration, which the Iranian authorities call economic terrorism, have completely failed. The fact of the matter is that sanctions against the Iranian government only work so much. The fact of the matter is that there has to be more, but I'm glad, however, that at least there's been some measure to take action against Iran's governments for supporting Houthi terrorism. So for those of you out there who are saying, well, we know that the Houthis are terrorists, and we know they're getting guns and training from Iran, but how do we know that the Iranian government was responsible? Well, your evidence is right here once again. And I will include this article in the feed so you can all take a look. And so the fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, is that the Iranian government is openly supporting this open support of this terrorism. They are funding it, they are supplying it, and they're training the participants in it. This isn't a matter of debate. And we look at Iran, what Iran is doing, and it's just absolutely horrific. I mean, you would think, oh well, why would the Iranian government do this? I mean, don't they have a stake in promoting stability and peace in the region? Well, you would think, but they don't. The Iran government and has been essentially supporting terrorism for years in the region. This is well-known news, and we'll actually read some information on this so that way you can get a look at it. So here we have information from the U.S. Department of State, Country Reports on Terrorism 2019, Iran. So the information's a little older, but it's still pretty accurate. It's so. Here we go. Designated as a state sponsor of terrorism in 1984, Iran continued its terrorist-related activity in 2019. When did they ever stop? Including support for Hezbollah, Palestinian terrorist groups in Gaza, and various terrorist groups in Syria, Iraq, and throughout the Middle East. Iran used the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force, the IRGC-QF, to provide support to terrorist organizations, provide cover for associate covert operations, and create instability in the region. So tick, tick, tick in the case of Iran with the Houthis in Yemen. Iran has acknowledged the involvement of the IRGC-QF in the Iraq and Syria conflicts, and the IRGC-QF is Iran's primary mechanism for cultivating and supporting terrorists abroad. So on a little extended note, Iran is not just supporting terrorism in Yemen through the Houthis. They're also doing it in Iraq. In fact, recently, as you all know, there was a terrorist attack in the Green Zone in Iraq from the attack on the U.S. embassy there. And in Syria, and of course, everyone knows that the Iranians are 100% behind the puppet and the butcher Bashar al-Assad, or Bashar the Butcher as he should be known. In 2019, the Secretary of State designated the IRGC, including the Quds Force, as a foreign terrorist organizations, an FTO. Iran has used regional proxy forces to provide deniability in an attempt to shield it from accountability for its aggressive policies. So this is very common among, nation states that are sponsors of terrorism, like Iran in occupied Persia, which is to essentially support an outside group, support them, covertly and quietly with weapons, with training, in bomb making, drones and all sorts of other things and activities. But then, say, oh, well, we're not really supporting terrorism. It's not us. But of course, we all know, where the source comes from. In 2019, Iran supported various Iraqi Shia terrorist groups, including Kataib Hezbollah, KH, Harakat al-Nujaba, and Asib al al al-Haq. During the same period, KH was responsible for a series of rocket attacks against American interests in Iraq, which culminated in the death of an American citizen following a +30 rocket barrage in December 2019. My apologies. I tend to think that I'm much more culturally aware than other people because of my personal experience with people of numerous different geographical backgrounds, but sometimes I do make mistakes on the pronunciation. For anyone out there who is either Arab or Persian, and I make a mistake on pronunciation of a name or a place, I do apologize. On December 31st, Iran-backed Shia militia groups, including KH, participated in an attack on U.S. Embassy Baghdad, which resulted in significant damage to embassy property. There were no embassy casualties, and security personnel used less than lethal countermeasures to repulse intruders. It also bolstered the Assad regime in Syria and Shia terrorist groups operating there, including Hezbollah. Iran views the Assad regime in Syria as a crucial ally, and Syria and Iraq as vital routes through which to supply weapons to Hezbollah, Iran's primary proxy group. So, as you can see right there, the Iranians in occupied Persia have been consistent in trying to attack the U.S. and try to kill as many people as possible, including attacking embassies, which are essentially political outposts for a certain government, which are essentially no-go. You're not supposed to attack an embassy for anyone. I mean, that's kind of the ground rule right there. Even for the traitor, Julian Assange, who snuck into the I think it was the Ecuadorian or the Bolivian embassy in London. Remember, even the police did not go, despite that the man was a traitor. Had literally, sold, given secrets to our enemies, which compromised numerous American and British assets. Even then, despite all that, they did not go into the embassy because they knew that that's just a rule. You don't go into a government's embassy. You just don't do that. It's essentially like the territory of that nation. But of course, that's nothing for the Iranian government. They attacked the U.S. embassy in Iraq, despite the fact that if you attack an embassy, you are essentially risking civilian casualties because the people who work there are civilians, not just from the government they're employed by or from the nation that they represent, but locals too who work there too, whether they're janitorial staff or receptionists or security or something like that. Thankfully, there were no casualties, but again, they still do that, and they support them. Why? Because, again, by supporting terrorism in Iraq and Syria and trying to prop up proxy governments up there, like the Dawa Party in Iraq, and like Bashar al-Assad or Bashar the Butcher in Syria, it helps them get more weapons and more supplies to Hezbollah, which is an active terrorist group throughout the region. Particularly in Lebanon. And, that's a video for another day, but Hezbollah absolutely destroyed Lebanon. And, hopefully one day the Christian Maronites of Lebanon will rise up against Hezbollah and take their country back and make it a Maronite Christian country again. Through financial or residency enticements, Iran has facilitated and coerced primarily Shia fighters from Afghanistan and Pakistan to participate in the Assad regime's brutal crackdown in Syria. Iran-supported Shia militias in Iraq have also committed serious human rights abuses against primarily Sunni civilians. So that's especially what happened in Iraq. When when things got tense in Iraq during the U.S. intervention after the Ba'ath regime was crushed, the Iranians sponsored a lot of Shia militant groups who essentially were just murdering Sunnis left and right, and nearly caused a civil war. You know, it's absolutely horrible. You know, I mean, it got tense right there. I mean, that chaos allowed Al Qaeda to actually come into the country, but thankfully, the U.S. did not leave leave Iraq, and so from 2007 to 2008, Al Qaeda operatives tried to infiltrate and tried to get into the country, but they were defeated, and because we stuck it through. But you know, the killings of Sunnis by Shia militant gangs exacerbated the situation and literally almost led to a civil war. Iranian forces have directly backed militia operations in Syria with armored vehicles, artillery, and drones. Well, we know that. Since the end of 2006, Israeli Hezbollah conflict, Iran has supplied Hezbollah with thousands of rockets, missiles, and small arms in direct violation of UNSCR 1701. Israeli security officials and politicians expressed concerns that Iran was supplying Hezbollah with advanced weapon systems and technologies. Yeah, just like they're doing with the Houthis in Iran. You know, we saw the video of them literally sending them, you know, missiles, and of course they're giving them drones and other stuff like that, as well as assisting the group in creating infrastructure that would permit it to indigenously produce rockets and missiles to threaten Israel from Lebanon and Syria. You know, it's part of the Iran strategy to trying to support more terrorism in the region, that it can try to distance itself from, in the sense that they can say, oh, well, it wasn't us, it was them. Of course, we all know where it comes from. Iran has provided hundreds of millions of dollars in support of Hezbollah and trained thousands of its fighters at camps in Iran. Hezbollah fighters have been used extensively in Syria to support the Assad regime. In Bahrain, Iran has continued to provide weapons support and training to local Shia militant groups, including the Al-Ashtar brigades. In Yemen, Iran has provided weapons support and training to the Houthi militants who have engaged in terrorist activities against regional targets. So it's not just, you know, as you can see, the Iranians supporting, you know, the Houthis in Yemen. They're also supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria. You know, they're supporting the Dawa Party and militant groups in Iraq. But they're also supporting even in Bahrain, which we, you know, very often hear little about. And they're supporting, you know, militant Shia groups there, like the Al-Shatar Brigade. And so when the Saudis, you know, at one point sent in troops to Bahrain at the request of the Bahrain royal family and the Bahrain government, people said, oh, no, that's bad. You can't do that. Well, it was to combat groups just like this, just like they're doing now in Yemen. And God bless them for fighting these terrorists. In 2019, Iran provided support to Hamas and other designated Palestinian terrorist groups, including Palestine Islamic Jihad and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command. These Palestinian terrorist groups were behind numerous deadly attacks originating in Gaza and the West Bank, including attacks against Israeli civilians in the Sinai Peninsula. So it's not just Houthi civilians being killed. Houthis killing Yemeni civilians from guns and weapons that they get from Iran. But as we can see, other people in the region are dying because of the Iranian government in occupied Persia. The Iranian government maintains a robust offensive cyber program and has sponsored cyber attacks against foreign governments and private sector entities, and that's true. They understand that cyber warfare is important, and they're upping their game there. Iran remained unwilling to bring to justice senior Al-Qaeda AK members residing in the country and has refused to publicly identify members in its custody. Iran has followed AK facilitators to operate a core facilitation pipeline through Iran since at least 2009, enabling AK to move more funds and fighters to South Asia and Syria. So for anyone out there who has said that that the Iranian government has never been colluded with or supported Al-Qaeda, well, you've got your evidence right there from the U.S. State Department, okay? They're saying so. If they're facilitating fighters throughout the region. So again, international sponsors of terrorism, not just the Houthis, not just Hezbollah, not just Hamas, not just not just the Al-Shatar brigades, but also even Al-Qaeda. As in past years, the Iranian government continues supporting terrorist plots to attack Iranian dissidents in several countries in continental Europe. In recent years, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Albania have all either arrested or expelled Iranian government officials implicated in various terrorist plots in their respective territories. So they haven't gone and seized their embassies, mind you, but they have gone and said to those diplomats in places like that, look, you're leaving, you're getting out of here. You've got 24 or 48 hours to leave the country, persona non grata, et cetera, because they all understand that the Iranian government in occupied Persia, make Iran Persia again. They understand that this government is literally supporting terrorism in their countries. Denmark similarly recalled its ambassador from Tehran after learning of an Iran-backed plot to assassinate an Iranian dissident in the country. Well, thank God bless Denmark for actually, standing up against the Iranian terrorism compared to other nations which are bowing to it. So why you say, well, why include that too? I mean, that wasn't completely relating to the Houthis, but it goes to the point here of this video is that the Houthis are terrorists, and they are sponsored, aided, and abetted by Iran. And then you say, well, why would Iran do that? Why would the Iranian government, in occupied Persia, do that sort of thing? Well, as you saw right there, that goes to the next point. Because they have historically supported terrorism in the region for geopolitical reasons, supporting terrorism in Bahrain, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, and specifically for this video, in Yemen, because they are trying to essentially kill as many people as possible, create terror, create chaos, all for their twisted version of Islam, which is a bastardization of the true religion of Islam, because real Muslims don't do this sort of terrible thing that the Iranian government is doing, but the Iranian government is essentially trying to force its version of Islam, which is wrong, on other people through essentially the gun. And we're seeing that they've sadly been very effective at doing that, and resulted in the deaths of numerous people all across the country, in Yemen, and not just in Yemen, but all across the region. And so you would say, well, what are the comments from the Yemeni government, or the legitimate government of Yemen, not the, and what are there any comments from them? I mean, are they saying anything? Well, they did. This right here, at UN, Yemen foreign minister, and I do not believe this gentleman is the foreign minister anymore at this point in time, but he was, demands end to Iranian coup d'etat. This gentleman right here, and he did an awesome video one time, and we're going to actually watch that another time. His name is Mohammed Abdullah al-Hadrami, Minister for Foreign Affairs, or at least former Minister for Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Yemen, when addressing the general debate of the General Assembly's 74th session at the UN. And so right here, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Yemen on Saturday called the United States and the wider international community to stand by his crisis-torn country as it struggled to cope with the daily assaults and terrorist aggression at the hands of the vicious Iran-backed Houthi militias. My heart is full of sorrow considering the ongoing crisis in the country. Mohammed Abdullah al-Hadrami, Minister for Foreign Affairs, told the General Assembly. Yemen had a long, proud history as a cradle of Arab civilization, but in just a few years, it has all been destroyed. My country has been deeply wounded by sectarians and terrorists trying to achieve their own ends, he said, adding that the Houthi militias, supported by Iran, have proved to be capable of untold destruction. Condemning Iran as the main sponsor of terrorism throughout the world, Mr. al-Hadrami said, Tehran's expansionist agenda led it to wage proxy wars through militias like the Houthis, who have destroyed everything that was beautiful in my country. Homes, places of worship, hospitals, and they have asphyxiated all forms of dissent. So as you can see right there, that it's not just the US saying this from the last article, it's also the Houthis saying. And so as we see right here, the Yemeni government themselves are saying this, are literally openly saying this. And because they understand the facts compared to many people who are trying to be essentially apologists for the Houthis. And yes, there are apologists for them. I have seen them on Twitter. It's absolutely repugnant. And guess what? Guess who it was? It was a regressive progressive type. And in just a few years, militias had been able to destroy all the dreams of Yemen and its people, he said, demanding an end to the Iranian Houthi coup d'etat in Yemen, denouncing Iran as a rogue state that does not respect international law or its obligations as a UN member state. He said Iran and its military arms in the Arab region, including Houthis and Hezbollah, pose a serious threat to our national security. It's very, and I just love it when there is an Arab leader out there who is standing up for their people against the aggression that they're seeing from occupied Tehran, and not just calling out terrorist groups in their region, but calling out terrorist groups in other areas like Hezbollah. Yet he said that despite the difficulties and the sacrifices of the Yemeni armed forces, Yemen had been able to put up a resistance to the Iran-backed threat, thanks largely to Saudi Arabia, a fraternal kingdom that helped Yemen to contain the untold violence of the militias. So it's not just, once again, and I've addressed this in my last video, it's the Yemenis actually wanted Saudi Arabia to help them. They asked Saudi Arabia to help them. And I addressed that point in my first video on whether the intervention was legal or legitimate. And one of the ways in which an intervention is legal and legitimate is when a government, actually official government, recognized government, says, yes, please come and help us. The Yemeni government, Mr. al-Hadrami continued, has endeavored to improve the economic situation and jumpstart development. With the implementation of an economic strategy, indeed, it was sparing no effect to alleviate the suffering of all its people, who are facing a humanitarian disaster on a daily basis. Yes, so many people are suffering in Yemen, and the suffering is caused by Iran and by the Houthis. And we're going to address some more terrible, allegations and credible, verifiable ones in a future video regarding just that, regarding the humanitarian crisis that has been caused by the Iranian government and carried out by the Houthi terrorists. In that regard, he again thanked Saudi Arabia for providing some $500 million, that's $500 million, to bolster the Yemen humanitarian response plan. But he warned that Saudi Arabia and the wider international community's efforts were being undermined, not only by Iran-backed militias, but by attacks he said were carried out by air assets belonging to the United Arab Emirates. So this is kind of a split. This is where, there's a bit of a split. So remember, the United Arab Emirates was a part of the Arab coalition in Yemen. They were with the Saudis and the Egyptians and other groups and the Jordanians. But then the United Emirates started supporting the Southern Transitional Council, the STC. And the Southern Transitional Council, the STC, essentially want to split from Yemen as a whole. They said, look, our area in southern Yemen, we've got the ports, it's very prosperous, we were doing really well, and we don't want to be with you guys, and we want to do our own thing. So that region that I'm referring to was actually occupied by the British government and the British Empire, and so that area was much more developed and much more prosperous. And so the Southern Transitional Council is essentially saying, well, we want to split, because we see that we can do better off on ourselves. But of course, that government is illegitimate, and that's why you have Yemen, the official government, saying, look, if you have differences, please put those aside right now. Right now, we're fighting a common enemy, the Houthis. And so Mr. al-Hadrami affirmed support for the UN facilitated peace process and the efforts of the UN Special Envoy for Yemen. He pledged to engage positively and flexibly in all peace measures, namely the Gulf Initiative and its executive mechanism. He also supported the outcomes of the Comprehensive National dialogue and the UN Security Council measures, particularly its resolution 2216, 2015, which demanded an end to the violence in Yemen and imposed sanctions on individuals it says were undermining the country's stability. We talked about that earlier, how certain Iranian individuals have been sanctioned because they have been supporting the violence in Yemen. And of course, the Houthis had an opportunity to come to the table and talk peace, but it's nothing, and they don't care about peace. The talks have been essentially useless. We went to Sweden last year to give peace every opportunity. He's referring to an attempt when the legitimate government of Aden actually met with Houthi individuals, delegates, representatives, even though they have no legitimacy whatsoever, in Sweden, to try and broker a peace, to try and get a political solution. But of course, the Houthis didn't want a political solution. What they want is essentially to commit terrorism and essentially win all of Yemen. And so, of course, the talks went nowhere. And that's what al-Hadrami here, that's what this gentleman, is actually, al-Hadrami is saying. Because of the intransigence of the Houthi militias and their constant evasion of commitment to what has been agreed, it has not been in place for more than 10 months. Now, of course, as you can see right here, ladies and gentlemen, that the Houthis do not argue in good faith. They have no desire for peace. And so, as you are seeing right there, based off of the evidence, that the Houthis themselves don't want peace. So you say, well, what's the point of that? Well, we've already addressed that the Houthis are a terrorist group. The Houthis are getting arms and supplies from Iran. These weapons and training and supplies are being sent by the Iranian government itself, and with its full legitimacy. So individuals are doing it, and the government has essentially given its stamp of approval to that. That's what I mean, and has supported terrorism in the region for quite some time. And so, as you can see right there, the Yemeni people realize it themselves, and they're trying to highlight it to the world. It's so sad, though, how so many people aren't listening to them. And it's very disappointing. But we have to understand that what the Saudis are doing in Yemen is just, and they're trying to fight Houthi terrorism, and the Yemeni people who have suffered so much are trying to fight it themselves. And what has been the result of the horrific, terrorism that is propagated, by the Houthis with the support of the Iranian government? Well, Modern Diplomacy article right here: Iranian influence has destroyed Yemen, and Western media failed to tell the truth. Well, because there's far too many fifth columns and isolationists and regressive progressives in the media who are simping or supporting or trying to aid and abet our enemies. So this article, by the way, is written by Benjamin Minnick, and this was published back in June 2020. As you can see right there, this is a beautiful picture right here, absolutely gorgeous, seeing all that, all that, these beautiful buildings right here. How it looks today, who knows, because of the terrible war that Iran has forced on Yemen through their terrorist proxy, the Houthis. I recently had the great pleasure of taking part in an online symposium discussing the ongoing situation in Yemen. A little cover fact in Western journalism is the Houthi. The mainstream media in the U.S. seems to be a tad bit confused. There is a great need for clarification. Oh, that's the left-wing or progressive media getting it wrong. Oh my gosh, consider me chagrined. The Houthi are a quasi-religious group from northern Yemen. They are not the whole of the populace, despite their claims to be the true rulers and blessed representatives of God. The movement was started in the late 2000s by two brothers that were from a local tribe that was well known as the Houthi. Now that has been explained, let me introduce you to who they really are. Yemen is a wonderful, culturally rich country on the outskirts of the Arabian Peninsula. Sadly, over the centuries, they as a country have been decimated. A number of rulers have pillaged their resources in the name of the holy. As well, that's exactly what the Houthis are doing today with what the Iranian government is doing in the Middle East as a whole. Modern times have failed to stop this. Until 1962, the country was a patriarchal theocracy. The ruling family constantly applied taxes to the people. All governments require such taxes from their people, usually to fund public projects and infrastructure. In the case of Yemen, the only benefit came to the ruling class and their full stomachs. The people were hungry and dying. So this is referring to before. This is referring to the areas that were not under control of the British Empire. So the areas in the south of Yemen that were controlled by the British were prosperous, developed. There was jobs and opportunity. But in the north part of Yemen, the Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen today, that was not under the control of the British. That was, as you can see, under the control of tribal leaders who exploited their people and exploited them for money while the people were hungry and starved. So when people say that the British Empire was bad, I disagree with that. The British Empire did a lot more good compared to what some of the local rulers did, exploiting their people. Democracies seem to be the answer, save for their physical location. It is no secret that the Middle East is a constant powder keg. Constant disagreements between warring factions keep the region in a constant state of upheaval. Fractured, starving countries provide an inviting home for nefarious deeds, especially when they seemingly embrace the Western ideals of democracy. During the 1990s, Hezbollah found a home in Yemen, initially providing money and infrastructure. Once their foothold was established, things changed. The Iranian-controlled terror faction began several campaigns of terror in the region. The bombing of the USS Cole, while imports signaled a paradigm shift. It was no longer safe for U.S. forces. So as you can see, Iran's clause in Yemen didn't start, recently in the past 10 years. They go, almost 2 decades. No, more than 2 decades, in which Hezbollah, their proxy, found an idea, we can actually get into Yemen, and where people are hungry or starving, we can offer them food, and then we come in, we take them charge, we essentially indoctrinate them, and then we essentially use it as a place to attack the U.S. So sadly, as we can see right there. Fast forward for a few years, at the center of Iran's kleptocratic regime is still there. The Houthi insurgency has taken the once internationally recognized government by storm. So much for that. For a while, the balance of power seemed to shift weakly. When the smoke cleared, the Houthi rebels have taken the country. So thankfully, they don't have the whole country. They only have a portion of it. And as we talked about earlier, recently the Houthis have suffered, recently in months, 5,000 casualties. And they're getting desperate, which is why they attacked the UAE recently. And so let's hope that the trend continues to go in the right direction. The West sat there and watched while Iran operated under its grand puppet show. Like good pupils, the Houthis systematically tore the country asunder. Money, food, and other resources were looted from the people. Iran stood in the wings like a loan shark. The rebels were rewarded and the people were punished. Even Saudi intervention could not stop it. The Saudis have been doing their best to try and stop it, and thank God that they've been doing so much work, especially not just them, but also, Egyptians, Jordanian, and, for a time, the UAE. Despite the divisions between the official government in Yemen and the Southern Transitional Council, at the end of the day, they're still both fighting the Houthi terrorists. And of course, I like that. Iran stood in the wings like a loan shark, which is what it does. It supports Shia extremists in these countries, but it's not doing it for free. It's doing it to essentially expand its power and its influence and its reach through supporting Islamic fundamentalism. The new racist tax serves to further undermine the country. Non-Houthi people are taxed as much as 25% on everything. Wow. Damn near even the air they breathe. The rulers make their cut and send the rest to Iran. They are then rewarded with weapons and orders to carry out dirty work. They have been annexed by Iran by way of a proxy militia. That's just horrible. So as you can see, these Houthi terrorists who claim to be freedom fighters are not freedom fighters. They're extorting their own people at the behest of the Iranian government occupied Persia. So they're traitors. And traitors to not just their country, but traitors even to their own tribe and their own people. International aid has been poured into the region from many countries, including KSA and the United States. So, KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The problem, the real issue, is that the people never see it. The rulers take their cut, and the rest gets funneled back to Iran. The people are left out. Their images are used to stir up human rights activists and generate revenue. Exactly, yeah. No one sees how much the United States and the KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, gave to Iran. Gave to the people of Yemen to try to help them. They only see what the Houthis want them to see. The international community would never directly support the Houthi. They are only a level in a great pyramid scheme that Iran has going. The entire situation has been carefully constructed by the Iranian regime as a method for bypassing the sanctions levied on them by the West. Recent events in the region lend credence to this. That's a fact right there. They have sanctions. Iranian officials have been sanctioned. And so what they are doing, they'll bypass them as best they can in order to get weapons, to get guns, and to kill innocent people. It's terrible. And that's why we have to stand against it and support the Saudi Arabians against the Houthis and the people of Yemen against the Houthi terrorists. The attacks on Saudi petrochemical infrastructure late last year were carried out by Houthi rebels. The drones and munitions used could not have been built in Yemen. They were provided by Tehran as a means of destabilizing the region. The Houthi happily carried out this mission and claimed responsibility. This did two things. First, it gave them a projected image of power. Second, it allowed Iran to act as a puppet master, accomplishing their own agenda without getting their hands dirty. As we talk, that's typically how the Iranian government tries to do things. Support proxies with training, support proxies with arms, and every now and then send in a military advisors and stuff like that, and every now and then volunteers, but try to pretend not get your hands dirty as much. And as you can see right there, they are using it to project their power to create more instability and terror in the region. And that's the strategy of the Iranian government. Train, support, give logistics to these groups, and then give them the means to try and do it in their own country. So that way but of course the Houthis aren't there yet, and hopefully they'll never get to that point. Sadly, though, what we saw with the recent drone attack, they are starting to do exactly what Hezbollah did in Lebanon. Shortly after this, Houthi pirates captured an oil tanker and its crew. There was a brief period of coverage by the media, but was soon eclipsed by the high-profile assassination of General Soleimani. General Soleimani, I should no tears for him. I'm glad that the Trump administration authorized that drone strike that eliminated him. He was a murderer of U.S. troops, and murderer of Iraqi civilians, and the world is a better place off now that this general, who was essentially a terrorist, is now gone. The Houthi movement had representatives at that enclave as well. There is no such thing as a perfect coincidence. So General Soleimani himself was with Houthi individuals. So as you can see right there, we talked about the evidence of Iran supporting the Houthis and literally in this case right here, talking about them essentially being at that enclave, with General Soleimani, which essentially again it just shows that the Iran has its hand in the cookie jar. We've proven it. The majority of my counterparts here in America were fed a narrative, and they followed it. While they turned a blind eye to the honest facts, attacks are being carried out on American forces in the vicinity. A good number of these were carried out by the Houthi militias in conjunction with other Iranian proxies in the region. Yes, so we talked about how recently the Iranians have attacked the U.S. embassy in the Green Zone in Baghdad. Well, they don't just try to attack embassies, which you're not supposed to attack. No one is supposed to attack. No one's supposed to go into where civilians were killed. They've also been trying to kill U.S. troops. Of course, progressive socialists and fifth columns and isolationists among the left here in America, and even among the right, among the paleo conjobs, ignore this. This paints a very dark picture in the eyes of the average American, thanks to the narrative that has been force-fed by the cowards in the media. Uh, consider me chagrined. Yemen is Houthi, they are bad, and that is not the truth. Yemen is a country full of people that want to live with basic human rights. Unfortunate events led to a coup that decimated them. They certainly did not invite Iran in with open arms. Very much true. That Iran was not welcome. Iran has tried to destroy Yemen, and the Yemeni people are trying to fight back against the Houthi terrorists. The time has come that we face the truth. Iran did not like being called to task, so they found a way around the sanctions. Now there is an entire group being taxed to the extremes of poverty, even death. So when you hear people in the West try to tell you that the blockades again in the ports to try and stop weapons and guns from getting to the Houthis is the reason that people in Yemen, in Houthi-controlled areas, are starving. No, it's the fact that the Houthis are literally stealing the money of the people there and stealing the food aid of the people there in order to prop themselves up and to support the illegitimate Iranian regime in occupied Persia. The legitimate government of Yemen should be in power. The Houthi threat should be neutralized. Amen to that. Yemen should be supported and built back up by the international community. Yes, we need nation building there. Iranian influence should be kicked back to Tehran and systematically dismantled. Oh, preach. This should only be a dream for so many until the truth is told and something is done. Oh, man, those last words right there, just preach, brother, preach. But I'm just amazed of how people tend to ignore the facts of the region for their own political purposes and stuff like that. It's very sad, but you people don't talk about what the Houthis are doing in their terrorist activities. It's absolutely repugnant. What's going on. So we've proven it essentially beyond, any doubt. We've essentially proven that the Houthi terrorists are supported by the Iranian government, and they are committing terrible acts with weapons that they get from Iran, and doing absolutely horrible things. And the evidence is just overwhelming. And it's not just, so for people to ignore these realities, they're doing a huge disservice to the people in that region, to the Yemeni people who are fighting for a righteous cause, and that is to save their country from the claws of the Iranian government, and to have a nation in which they have that they call their own, that is not under essentially nothing more than a proxy of the Iranian government. I just want to say that that last article right there, those last statements were just based, like so epically based. It was just so important, and it just really, it just highlights the fact that some people are waking up to the progressive lies about Yemen.
You see, sweetheart, no one's buying what you're selling anymore.
Yeah, we need to stop buying what the Iranians are selling, what the Iranian apologists are doing, whether it's on Twitter and stuff like that. Again, we have the facts. We have all the facts right here, and I've just presented to them numerous ones. And, I'll continue to do so because there's so much more that needs to be told about what's going on that it is just sadly not being told. It's absolutely, sad that people are, ignoring this. And it's causing terrible things to happen. People are dying because of what the Houthis are doing. There are, and it's not just them targeting, innocent people. in Yemen, innocent people from Saudi Arabia. They're also, again, uh, doing it to a broader extent to people who aren't even from the region. Don't believe me? I'll show you. So right here we have another article. Okay, Yemen's Houthi rebels hijacked towboat with apparent Saudi link. Boat boat pulling oil rig is said to be South Korean, but the tracking site says home port is Jeddah. Yemen's Houthi rebels have hijacked a boat towing a South Korean drilling rig, a Rigia-led coalition has said, with a global shipping tracker calling it a Saudi-flagged vessel. So this is a South Korea drilling rig. This is not. So as we can see right there, that the Houthis are not just targeting the United States. They're not just targeting Saudi Arabia. They're not just targeting the innocent people of Yemen. They're also targeting anyone else who just happens to be there, like even neutral nations like South Korea. And it's sad, and no one should be neutral when it comes to the, Houthi terrorists. Neutrality in the face of evil like that is just wrong. If you're not angry at evil, then there is a problem. Just saying. But let's get back to that article and finish it up. So, Sunday's incident in the Red Sea follows a lull in Houthi attacks on Saudi Arabia, as one Riyadh official said the kingdom has established an open channel with the Iran-backed rebels. On Sunday, during the sailing of the tugboat Rakbi 3 in the southern Red Sea, it was hijacked and subjected to armed robbery by terrorist elements affiliated to the Houthi militia, the coalition spokesperson said. Turki al-Maliki said. The boat was towing a marine rig owned by a South Korean company, Maliki said in a statement posted in the official press agency. So, as you can see right here, and if you'd like to read the rest of the article, feel free to do so. I will post that in the chat, so that way, you can read it yourself and see the information presented. Oh, whoops, wrong one. And see the information presented yourself. The Houthis are attacking anyone and everything that gets in their way of an Islamic caliphate in Yemen, and they're doing it with the blessing of the Iranian government, with arms and training from them and supplied from them. I mean, how much more of this has to happen before people wake up? It's just absolutely sad. It's ridiculous that people just aren't listening. I mean, don't listen to me. If you don't want to listen to me, that's fine. Don't listen to me. But at the very least, listen to the Yemeni people who are suffering from the Houthis and ask them what they're going through. Talk to them and hear their stories of what is happening in the region and what the Houthis are doing with and being supplied by Iran. Listen to them, hear what they have to say. And if you do, you'll hear the truth. We already discussed what a member of the government in Yemen said, but let's listen to the stories of the average civilian in the country. Women survivors of Houthi prisons speak out against their abusers. This was published in last year, March 8th, from Inside Arabia. 3 survivors of Houthi prisons and detention facilities have come forward to share details of their abduction and abuse at the hands of their Houthi captors. Bardis Asayagi, who was detained by the Houthis in Yemen in her home near Cairo, Egypt. Asayagi, a prominent poet who circulated verses about Houthi repression, was detained last fall in a school and counted around 120 women held there. Some nights, the head of the Sana Criminal Investigation Division, Sultan Sabin, took the young, pretty girls out of the school to rape them. Another former detainee of Simri al-Huri Asiyagi said. So as you can see, the Houthis are not just killing their own people. They're not just stealing and exploiting, their own people financially as well. They're also even committing rapes upon their own women. This is just absolutely horrific. Since overthrowing Yemen's internationally recognized government of Adruba Mansur Hadi in 2015, what was known as the Hadi government, the Houthi militias have controlled the capital Sana'a with an iron fist, intimidating, imprisoning, and killing anyone who stands in their way, be it political opponents, critics, human rights activists, journalists, or academics. The Iran-backed, rebel group's brutality has drawn condemnation from human rights organizations and the United States, which designated the Houthi militias a terrorist organization in January, only to reverse the decision a month later. This that kind of weakness just emboldens our enemies and causes more of, intimidation, imprisoning, and murders of people who try to stand up to the Houthis' terrorism. The reversal was made out of concern the terrorist organization would impede humanitarian efforts from reaching those who affected by the ongoing conflict, which was pitted the rebels against the Saudi-led coalition. Foolish. The Houthis just take that as weakness, and not only that, they take the aid that you give them and steal it for themselves and put the rest on the black market. Women have borne the brunt of violence in Houthi-controlled areas, with the United Nations Population Fund reporting a 63% increase in gender-based violence since the conflict began, including rape, torture, and other forms of physical and psychological abuse and trauma committed by the Houthis, ladies and gentlemen. Geneva-based human rights organization SAM monitors have accused the Houthi militias of perpetrating systematic violations against women, including arbitrary detention and torture against approximately 200 women detained in Houthi detention facilities. Isn't this just horrific? The Houthis are literally taking women and abusing them, beating them, raping them, jailing them. And where's the condemnation? Where is the action? The only the Arab coalition, but then, oh no, Arab coalition, Saudis are bad. We're so stupid. Female human rights activists, journalists, teachers, charity workers, and artists have been especially targeted, including prominent Yemeni poet Bardis al-Sayigi, who was arrested for writing poems about Houthi repression. Most are forced into signing false confessions regarding espionage, aiding the enemy, drug trafficking, and prostitution. And this is typical of these terrorist groups. 3 of the survivors of Houthi detention facilities have now come forward to tell their stories through Yemen's RASD coalition for monitoring human rights violations, YCM HRV. These are the details of their abduction, and I can't get in yet. So these are the stories of 3 women, okay, who have been essentially beaten, abused, raped. Let's look at one of them. So from Gada Mohammed Abdul Haraman Al-Asi. I was taken from my home in Sana'a at 7 p.m. on October 21st, 2018. I was immediately subjected to physical and psychological torture. The female supervisors were cruel and showed no mercy, just like monsters. There were a lot of detainees who were kidnapped from the markets, parks, and public places. They tortured us with electricity, beating, and slavery. Some were tortured to death. They put me on trial and I was sentenced to 2 years in jail. Several men took turns torturing us, and their names are Abu Hassan, Hassan Batran, and Sultan Saben. And this person's on a U.S. government sanction list. The names of the female guards are Fatin, Takia, and Fardous, along with others. They tortured us with electricity, beat us with wires, and prevented us from going to the bathroom. We were also denied clothes and blankets in the dead of winter. We were held in solitary confinement too. I was beaten in various parts of my body by a huge number of men in the investigation room. There were no basic necessities of life in prison. Even the food was so bad. We lived on 1 meal a day for months. We were allowed to go to the bathroom only once a day. Sometimes we were not allowed to use the bathroom, in addition to being denied medical treatment and medical review. I lost everything because of the Houthis. I lost my family who disowned me and expelled me from my home. I was forced to flee the country because I can't live where I don't feel safe. I was accused of collaborating with the former regime, as well as drug cases, which led to my family and my tribe to expel me and wish for my death. So you hear this story from an actual Yemeni who lives there on what the Houthi terrorists are doing. Let's look at another from Nidal Mutahana Madi Mutahar. They presented a search warrant and raided my house on August 18, 2019 in Sana'a, and then blindfolded me and took me to a place that I didn't recognize. I was never told what I was charged with. I was taken to the criminal investigation unit and interrogated, and the interrogation lasted throughout the night and until the next morning. They used immoral methods during the investigation, in addition to the unjustified brutality while dealing with me. They beat me on my face with their foreknowledge of my pregnancy. I was also beaten with an electrical cable. What coward, beats not just a woman, but beats also a pregnant woman? Disgusting. I was the only pregnant woman among the detainees, but they didn't take into account my special circumstances. As a result of torture, I hemorrhaged many times. I once vomited blood while being interrogated as a result of being beaten and electrocuted. This is disgusting. The Houthi terrorists supported by Iran, not only beat, but they electrocuted a pregnant woman. I can't think of anything more vile and disgusting. The suffering I felt in prison affected my daughter Mira, who was with me in prison, and she is still in a state of psychological shock. She still cries whenever she sees an officer. She was denied food, and they even refused her bread. What kind of person does that to a child? Houthi terrorists supported by Iran, that's who. I still remember the man who tortured me the most. His name is Ahmed Mater. He would assault and torture me from dusk until dawn. I tried to commit suicide. I thought death would be better than this. Later, I was referred to the court, but not knowing the charges made against me. When I was taken to the judge, I didn't speak in fear they would frame me for a crime I didn't commit. I was threatened by the investigators that I'd be accused of trafficking in hashish, along with other crimes, if I told the judge what they did to me during interrogation. So I decided not to speak at all. So, absolutely horrible. And here's the last one. Fatima. I am a social activist and was detained for 87 days in the port city of Hodeidah after the Houthis arrested me in front of the Red Crescent Center in Al Mina district. I was lured there by an unknown woman claiming she represented a group of IDPs, internationally displaced people, in one of the neighborhoods. When we arrived, I realized it was a trap. I found myself in front of a heavily armed military vehicle when 5 gunmen and 2 women took me at gunpoint for no reason or explanation. They kidnapped me off the street coercively. I had no idea where I was taken to. I heard them mocking me. The first station was Al Rabsa police station, where my cell phone, notebooks, and pens were confiscated along with my dignity. It's just horrible. I was verbally abused and threatened to be beaten and sexually harassed. They took me to the central prison for 3 days. I didn't know what fate awaited for me. All I thought was my mother and siblings and how the community would think of me. I got nervous and frightened. I can understand that, a woman being essentially kidnapped, trying to do the right thing in Yemen, trying to help, internationally displaced people, only to be, taken under false pretenses to be told to go to an area and under false pretenses, and that should be kidnapped by the people, you're trying to help. The Houthis are absolutely disgusting terrorists. I was placed in a room that was 1 meter wide and 2 meters long and had a tiny bathroom in the same room. I couldn't change my clothes for 3 days. I was interrogated and asked to sign some papers after being threatened every evening. When they realized I had no evidence against me and I was not involved in anything, they say, "We will keep you as a hostage or swap you for captives." Absolutely repugnant. A violation of everything in terms of the rules of war and in the Geneva Convention. After that, I was transferred from solitary confinement to the prison wing, where there were 17 women prisoners and their children. I stayed there for 75 days. I was counting days and hours, and I was unable to communicate with my family. I wanted to know why I was detained. Well, we all know why she was detained. She was detained simply because the Houthis wanted to essentially take a hostage that they could use to aid their destructive and evil cause of establishing a, essentially a Islamic fundamentalist state in Yemen that would be propped up and supported by the Iranian government. We were forced to clean the bathrooms. We were constantly assaulted. There were many women who spent months and sometimes years there without anyone knowing. Can you imagine the families, wondering where their relatives are, not knowing if they're dead or alive, and not knowing, their state of their being? All of us were subjected to beatings, abuse, and insults from these savages. I would clearly call the people who did these things to, her savages. They denied us food, forced us to clean bathrooms and prison wings, and brutally tortured us, and some were sexually harassed. I just can't imagine. I cannot imagine, the horror of, being sexually harassed or sexually abused, especially in a situation like this. I just can't imagine the trauma. When I was released, I discovered my brother had passed away from a stroke, which was caused by the stress and him believing I had died or gone missing in detention. Absolutely horrific. And it's just, when are people going to wake up? You like I was saying earlier, you don't even have to listen to me. Listen to the people there in Yemen who are trying to tell you the truth about what the Iranian terrorist government is doing, and what the people in Yemen are going through at the hands of their proxy, the Houthi terrorists, who are murdering them, killing them, abusing them, blackmailing them, extorting them, and doing it all with the blessing and at the behest of the Iranian government in Tehran. And people want to say that Saudi Arabia and the Arab coalition are the bad guys when they're trying to stop this and when they're fighting it. Give me a break, people. Give me a break. This humanitarian crisis in Yemen never would have happened had it not been for the Ayatollahs and for the Iranian government in occupied Persia and for the Houthi terrorists. I just want you all to understand the facts. And this is again, I appreciate you all coming in to listen to this video. As I said before, this is going to be the second part. This is the second part of a stream that will be either a 6-part or a 7-part series that is strictly about the conflict in Yemen and why we need to support the Saudi Arabia coalition against the Houthi terrorists. And I really also hope too that you'll look at this article right here too, because one of the ways in which we're going to, because we talked about this earlier, of how the Houthis are getting weapons and guns and oil and gas to commit their acts of terrorism in Yemen is through Somalia. And the minister of in Yemen, Momar al-Irani, talks about the need for sanctioning Iran in order to stop the weapons getting into the country that are killing innocent people. And he's totally right. We need to people, wake up and realize that the Houthis are the terrorists. They are supported and aided and abetted by Iran. And they're the ones that are causing the terrorism. And they're the ones that are killing innocent people. And we have to support them in that righteous fight. We're heading up now on the hour and 41-minute mark. So I'm just going to look through some of the comments and see, just respond to anything right there. Voosh, Saudis can't even keep their fields open. Okay, what the heck does that even mean? Okay. Again, it's this whole ridiculous propaganda against the Saudis who are fighting, the good fight against terrorism. So, whatever, seethe, buddy. The Saudis also rely on the U.S. The Saudi government does work with the U.S., and that's a good thing, because guess what? all the changes that have happened in Saudi Arabia, because you want to talk criticisms and talk about, how like, oh, well, Saudi Arabia this and Saudi Arabia that. Saudi Arabia has only changed because of US influence. If we had done what isolationists and regressive progressives and Lolbutarians and paleo con jobs wanted us to do, Mike Gravel and Ron Paul types, if we had left Saudi Arabia, can you imagine just how worse it would have been in Saudi Arabia in terms of the extremism? Because of US influence and because of people like Mohammed bin Salman, who was heavily influenced by the US, the Saudi Arabia is changing in a positive direction, okay? And let's see who this is. Ironically, I support Saudi Arabia. Go away, you. I don't like you. They are very progressive. That's probably just some spam account of some kind. Everyone knows how I feel about the actual Vile Vosh, and he's a disgusting, degenerate individual. The things he said. I mean, I'm not going to discuss them right here, but I've got a whole video on that actually. If you want to check that out on on Vile Vosh, or aka Pedo Vosh, disgusting individual. Let's look over some of these other comments. And I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what that is. So obviously just some spam or something like that. I don't even know what that means right there. So obviously just some spam. Well, now that we're coming up on the 1 hour, 44-minute mark, we will close here. Again, I'm going to come out with a part 3 onto this conflict. And I really hope that you all will listen to that. And I'm trying to get, like I said, a journalist or a government official from Yemen onto the show to discuss this topic. The third issue is going to be the Houthis are not good faith actors. So this is going to be that video. The third part of the series is going to be explicitly discussing the idea that, well, we can negotiate a political settlement with the Houthis in order to bring about peace. My third video will essentially tear that argument apart. So that way, and that will be the third part of this series. I don't know when I'll be doing that because, again, this is the second part of my series, and this was released, several weeks, 3 or 4 weeks maybe after the first part. So it may be some time before that occurs. But I do just want to say thank you for coming on. Obviously, thank you for listening to me talk about this very, very important issue. Also, please, if you haven't already, go and see the first video in this series that I have been doing. I hope that you will examine that. That again, that video discusses why the intervention in Yemen is legal, legitimate, and so it goes more to the and support also by the regional nations. So that video was essentially more of like what the legal arguments to why of the intervention itself and stuff like that. So I'll put that in the chat right there. I hope you guys will take a look at that. And I do again want to thank you for listening into the show. I will be producing more content, and I recently made a SoundCloud account. So if you want to check that out, again, if you want to support my content, go on Ko-Fi. Again, subscribe to me on YouTube, subscribe to me on Twitter, subscribe to me on Twitch, subscribe to me on Goodreads. And if you want to find my accounts to follow and subscribe to me, again, you can do so via my link tree, which I've included in the chat. You can use that to look it up and find me at my different political accounts and stuff like that, advocating for Neo-Conservatism, in this day and age. because I am, as a Christian, you know, a neoconservative nationalist. So I do again want to thank everyone. Again, support me and follow me on YouTube. Support me and follow me on Twitch. Support me and follow me on Goodreads. Support and follow me on Steam, on SoundCloud, DLive. And if you want to financially support my content, please go to Ko-Fi. Once again, you can support me there. You know, to anyone this was the first time video for you for my stuff. Again, you know,
pleasure to be meeting you, sweetheart. Quite a pleasure.
Just want to say thank you for tuning in. You know, it was nice meeting you. I hope that you'll tune in. You know, next time. You know, I had a lot of facts in this video.
Is that enough facts for you?
But that's the way the video goes. I make sure to support my stuff with the facts and evidence, and not with, you know, regressive, progressive propaganda. Always that. Always telling the truth. Anyway, you know, doing my job for the United States of America, for allies, and the neoconservative cause against tyrants, despots, and terrorist organizations. Anyway, I hope you'll tune in for the third part of my series that will be coming. I'll try to get many journalists or government official to come on in the future for one of my videos, at the very least one. Thank you so much, guys. Subscribe, like to my channel, support me on Ko-Fi, and, you know, follow me on all my different link trees. And, you know, don't forget, everyone, V for victory and death to all tyrants.